The wildfires that are devastating California, destroyed tens of thousands of homes, killed 24 people, and have done over $200 billion, some upward up to $250 billion worth of damage, and caused, economic losses. So those two things combined, those fires are now among the costliest in recent history. Now, what if I told you that not only did we know this was going to happen, but we could have avoided it? How? How? The wildfire, unpredictable. Is it? Is it? That's exactly what happened. In 2019, the California State Climate Task Force had been warning the government that doing endless development in the state's high-risk wildfire zones was going to end up being a disaster. What happened? They did it anyway, and it was a disaster. Why did they do it? Because the real estate developers made bank. As the lever explains, in recent years that have returned, efforts to reduce high fire risk development, which sounds insane, right? Like, wait a minute, you're going to develop real estate, housing in a place that is prone to burning down? That doesn't sound like a smart idea, does it? Apparently, though, they don't care if it's smart because it makes them money. So now this, the efforts to try to reduce that development have been stymied by some very powerful real estate and construction interests. So this is all lobbying. This is all industry. The industry has successfully fought against limits on development for wildfire safety and even beat back safety standards for houses in fire-prone areas. So, I mean, anything that might mitigate or prevent entire neighborhoods from being burnt down, as opposed to like a single house. Well, I mean, no, can't do it. No, unacceptable. That means less profit for us.
Can't let that happen.
Now, that obviously not only puts homes at risk, but it puts people at risk. 24 people, as I mentioned, had died so far from these wildfires. Tens of thousands of people are without homes, possibly more. But look, the lever had uncovered a lobbying blitz against a state bill that would have limited new home construction in the state's most extreme fire risk areas, including some of the Los Angeles neighborhoods that were engulfed in the most recent fires. In fact, Democratic State Senator Henry Stern, who had previously lost his home in the 2018 Woolsey fire, okay, this guy was like, my house burnt down in the last giant wildfire. So maybe we ought to stop building new houses in wildfire areas because I don't want people to go through what I went through. Well, that makes sense, right? Now, his bill would have barred development in very high-risk zones with exceptions for cases in which local fire agencies adopted a comprehensive plan for wildfire risk management. Okay, so what happened to that bill? Fail. The effort to kill it was led by the California Building Industry Association, the lobbying arm of California's developers and building contractors, an industry estimated to have generated more than $60 billion in residential building revenues in the state in 2024. $60 billion. So they're building houses. They're building lots of houses. Now, the bill, after languishing for nearly a year, after it was first introduced, it died in committee. Now, you can't blame this one on Republicans, all right? California is Democratic control. But what you have is a case of where the industry has captured the government. And they do all sorts of lobbying. Now, here's the thing. You could argue that, Jeff, you don't understand. They have to keep developing more houses. You've got to develop more land. You've got to build more houses. We've got a housing crisis in this country. Yes, we do. We do. Now, the problem with your argument, though, is that this is all new housing. That's luxury housing. Okay. That's what's going on. They're not building affordable housing. They're building luxury homes that are very high priced. And so you're not really doing anything to solve the housing crisis by building luxury condos and mansions. All right. As Jack Ide, a Los Angeles-based urban planner and environmentalist, told The Lever, there's no money in affordable housing, but there is far more profits to be found in expanding suburban sprawl into undeveloped land. This incentive structure has driven development increasingly into risky fire zones, abetted by promises of trickle-down improvements to housing availability. No money in affordable housing. And that's it. That's the reason. It's all profit. These high-risk zones usually sit at the edges of the suburbs, where homes sit next to undeveloped land. In these wildland urban interfaces, that's what they call them, fires are most likely to begin. Now, that said, California is very dry. And as a result of course, climate change, it's sometimes goes months and months and months without any rainfall whatsoever. So it just takes a little spark in these areas and boom. Dry conditions, high winds, and look, this land is already wildfire prone. All this together, boom. And that's it. Now, you got a big problem. Now, that said, you know who doesn't deal with this problem? The industry. Yeah, they profit from this. Who profits from the development? Industry, obviously. Who profits from the rebuilding after everything burns down? You guessed it, industry. You build new houses. And here's the thing, right? Who pays for the cost of when wildfires sweep through the area, destroy all these homes in very high-risk areas? The taxpayer. That's who. And look, insurance company, this is why all the insurance companies are ducking out. They're like, no, we can't afford to do this anymore. These are high-risk areas. We're not going to cover these areas, okay? Because we are going to lose our shirts. So that's what's happening in California in these areas. It's also what's happening in Florida as a result of climate change, the hurricanes. And so insurance companies, they do believe in climate change. And they do have these risk models that they base what they're going to cover, who they're going to cover on. And right now, there are these places where it's like, it's too high a risk for us. We just can't do it. And when your insurance company ducks out, you got a problem, okay? So now, these companies, not the insurance companies, but the companies, the real estate developers, they do not get held accountable for building and developing in places that will eventually end up burning down, being destroyed. And this is all because of these lobbying groups. We end up having so many homes obliterated due to these wildfires. It's because of their efforts. Okay. Char Miller, which is kind of an interesting name, Char, an environmental historian at Pomona College in Claremont, California, said this, quote, "There's landscapes into which we move that we know are high severity fire zones, and we are given the green light to do so by city halls, county governments, planning boards, zoning commissions, architectural boards. They've all signed off on this." Now, her point was that this is a political problem. This is a policy issue. And it's a policy issue, she says, that has been shaped by decades of influence by the state's real estate interests. The state has seen developers and real estate interest groups again and again intervening in government through their lobbying to push against wildfire safety standards. Groups like the California Building Industry Association, which pushed back against a proposal made back in 2021 that would have required towns or cities to create fire safety standards before moving forward with developments in very high risk fire risk zones. The California Building Industry Association's president, Dan Dunmoyer, who makes $500,000 a year, called the proposal a, quote, no-growth strategy, saying its goal is to make it harder to build housing outside of the urban corridor. No, you can't just build houses everywhere, all right? You can't do that because there are some places which are going to be disaster areas that are going to burn down quicker, okay? That, again, that's a problem. And it's not just like your house that burns down. These wildfires destroy entire neighborhoods. That's one of the issues. Now, additional developers that also lobbied on that bill included two of California's master plan committee developers, as well as Brookfield, a global real estate investor and developer. California Building Industry Association has also advocated, sometimes successfully, for weaker wildfire safety standards. Now, think about that for a second. We know that climate change is making things drier in California, is contributing to dry season. So having weaker fire standards, lobbying for that, while knowing that, hey, climate change is actually making these, dry seasons even worse and increasing the risk of these devastating wildfires, that, I don't know, it should be criminal, in my view. Now, that said, because of regulatory capture of the government, okay, they have captured the regulators. These industries have lobbied the lawmakers. They can get away with it. For example, that industry association recently pushed a bill through the state Senate that would have abolished the state's current fire risk classification system entirely in favor of more limited mitigation zones. Now, that said, luckily, that effort has stalled, okay? But the weaker approach had the support of Governor Gavin Newsom. So, yeah. Look, there's a lot of factors involved in this, okay? In these wildfires, climate change, you got the real estate, lobbying, you got the population, all this stuff, right? High winds. Though at the root, a lot of what we see from the damage here, because again, wildfires do happen in California, and if they're happening in unpopulated land, well, that's much better than having entire neighborhoods get absolutely just demolished by these wildfires, okay? But when it comes down to it, putting those houses in those danger zones comes down to greed. These groups in these industries, they obviously privatize the gains from selling these houses, developing that land, and then socialize the losses. When it all gets burnt down, they don't have to pay anything. So they're doing all this profiting off your peril. In fact, last year, the same lobbying group backed a bill that environmentalists warned would have allowed developers to redesignate very high-risk fire zones as lower risk. Wow. Evading building code requirements and opening up the door to even more development in risky wildfire corridors. This is just an example of straight-up naked greed. And if that's not bad enough, it actually gets worse. A bunch of landlords are getting caught price gouging the survivors of these fires. There's a popular information review of rental listings, which revealed dozens of properties where the landlords sharply increased their prices since the fires began on January 7th. They're like, well, yeah, I mean, supply and demand, right? Some of those landlords increased their rent by over 125%. Jesus. Now, California does have laws against price gouging during emergencies, and Newsom just recently declared a state of emergency, right? Now, the law prohibits hiking rental prices by more than 10% for 30 days after a state of emergency is declared. So now Popular Info, when they looked at it, yeah, they found a lot of home rental prices went way up. Again, 50, 60, over 125%. And then after a little while, these landlords were like, oh, there's a anti-price gouging law? Oh no. And so right back down, the price goes down to within that 10%. Dragging it up sometimes as high as 9.9% or 9.95 to hitting 10% exactly to get as much money as they can out. Now, of course, they were trying to find, they're finding out the hard way, okay? Violations are punishable by up to a year in jail, a $10,000 fine, or both. And so they wanted to avoid that, okay? Weird. I keep getting told that laws protecting consumers don't actually work. No, it turns out they kind of do. I mean, they're still charging, within the law, but at least they're within the law. And at least there is a law, because without it, we see what happens. But at the end of the day, all of this is an example of how our current system, capitalism, and greed is absolutely destroying us, wrecking lives, destroying entire communities, and screwing over survivors. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.